The March 26 SBL Preseen industry is the magazine industry, which is not very difficult. Now, the company name is called Merceh company, so a public listed company. So I prepared you a Preseen application notes going through the Preseen in-depth. Welcome. Now, firstly, if you go through the Preseen material, that you can see the intro. That's what I'm focusing on in this video, before we move on to the sector information and then the company itself, including the website and the financial part. Now, first things first, I would like to highlight the points that I've made based on the Preseen material, together with a few chapters I would like to go through related to this case. Now, I will be going through the whole Preseen information in depth before I move on to the process management, because we can see clues from the case that something needs to change. And especially that the editor may have too much power. So therefore, process optimization may be a hot topic this time. Now, it's important to also recognize the fact that the company is focusing only the leisure subject, which means, like, for example, the photograph and food and drink and other sports related topics, magazines. And these are subject to the economic effects, especially when the economy is not quite certain, that these are discretionary spending, which means the consumers can subscribe more or less. So creating unstable income for this company. So the marketing part is also very important this time. And then the chapter 4, because the current company has over 300 magazines, titles and something like that. So from a corporate strategist point of view, how you would be managing these portfolios, that's important. So this is why I will be covering or tipping the BCG matrix this time. We'll have lots of strategic choices and also how to manage change. And of course, we'll see that later on, and how we would lead the business and change the culture. And we'll see that later on. And of course, the risk management and internal controls will certainly be coming up each and every time. The ethics part, corporate governance, how to manage stakeholders using Mendelow's mapping matrix. And very importantly, strategic shift is a topic never came up, okay, from the September 23 onwards. So therefore, it's a hot topic. Now, let's review the introduction of this case. So firstly, we are told we are one of the 5 biggest publisher of magazines. So what do I mean by one of these top 5? This means that the market is highly concentrated. And to me, the magazine industry, the barriers to entry will be relatively high. So what I'm interested in would be the threat from the existing competitors, not from the new one. And also, I am focusing on the threat from substitute. So for example, that currently that we have the print-based and digital format magazines. So what if some sort of digital brand will replace our magazines? This could be a topical area that we need to focus on. So therefore, I would like to review a few cases. Let's see number 2 firstly. There might be a potential acquisition of certain digital brands in the exam. We are talking about the mergers and acquisition, or M&A for short. Which means when you are buying another company, don't just say to the examining team that it will create synergy. You will need to explain that in depth of what is going on. Now, a very good example from the real life that I'd like to show you is the company called Business. Now, it acquired, which means it bought, Merceh digital brand. If you're trading stocks or futures, you may have heard of the brand name called Investopedia. Of course, it's a very good website or digital brand that analyzing stocks. Now, here are the reasons why we may be expanding our business by buying other digital brands rather than simply focusing on our traditional magazines. Because nowadays we all use the internet. That's an example of a technology. We all know that. We all know that the SEO or the search engine optimization will be very powerful nowadays, which means if you search for any keywords from Google search engine, that whether or not your results will be listed at the top place. That's very important. So this is why that when we are buying other digital brands, it may help us to gain more natural traffic or the organic traffic, okay, to our magazine, to our website. That's important. Don't forget another reason that we are buying Merceh Business, which means the media group, is that we can get their user data. All right, so that's also important. It also creates commerce links, which means that we can cross selling our product or our magazines to the users, okay, from the original business. So remember that that could be a change or a potential project that we can focus on as a starting point. Don't forget, after you bought something, you also need to think about the post-integration issues, and especially like Dotstash. What it did is to invest heavily in the technology platforms and content optimizations to improve the content better. So that's what the magazine company would do. But this is not enough, because another case I'd like to show you is that why we are talking about the M&A is because we are one of the top 5. So that's why we will need to outperform our existing competitor. From my perspective, one of the quickest ways that we could do will be to buy another business. However, in some jurisdictions, if you were to buy another business with similar content or the new content, that you may be forced to sell off your existing portfolio. So this is why I'd like to invite you to look at the first case, which means the future company, which means another magazine company buying the TI media. Now, it's the first case in my Preseen application notes that when the future POC bought TI media, according to the government authority from the UK, it's called the CMA, forcing future business to sell, for example, word soccer, and amateur photographer, and also trusted reviews. You need to get rid of those before you can buy the TI media. Otherwise, the regulatory authority may think that the market may be dominated by your business. So this means that when you are thinking of to buy another company on the exam day in this particular industry, always to think about whether or not we'll be meeting with the regulation. And especially the existing product portfolio, whether or not we should get rid of them. And of course, a very technical terminology that you may see is called divest, which means to sell off. Sell these brands. So you need to care about the implications to your business, especially for your cash flows and profit. Now, After you bought the TI Media, what Future PLC did would be to integrate the business. Now, how it did is that it kept the edit identity of the acquired titles, did not change them. So, after the Future PLC acquires the TI Media, what it did is to think of the integration issues. Now, what it did is to change the structure of the business into centralizing all the advertising, technology, and also management reporting. Of course, currently in our company that we are operating in a more of a divisional structure, managing all these magazines in various divisions. To a certain extent, that these functions may be duplicated, and of course, it will waste some money. So why not just to centralize it? Now, to centralize them, centralizing all these departments will allow you to reduce your costs. All right. So be specific in the SBL exam. Don't just say that it's good to buy it. Will reduce our costs, but you will need to read the exhibit information on the exam day from the examining team to see where not the department could be centralized or combined together. But this is not enough, because the Future PLC will also actively review the portfolio and to see whether or not certain product lines are not profit making. Of course, this time I'll also heavily focus on the relevant cost analysis, because not came up for a very long time. Although last time when we are talking about the left rail PLC, that we are talking about the financing options. So for example, the debt to equity and sale and leaseback options for the pros and cons of those. That's within the SBL syllabus. Now, the shutdown decision could also be a very common topic this time. So make sure that you focus on the loss contribution and the saved fixed costs if you were to shut down one of the components in your business. That's important. Now, is that enough? No, because one of these top 5, another very practical issue specifically to this industry, is all about the platform partnership. I'm not sure that you're aware of this. So for example, if you go to Apple News, that you can see many magazines have been the player in the Apple News. As we can see there, that if you download the particular app from Apple, they can see various magazines or content from these magazine providers. The benefit of those, of course, it will improve wider visibility and of course creating more cash for these magazine companies, publishers. But downside of that, you may be thinking of, well, if too many companies stepping into that particular application, it creates severe competition. It will reduce the profits that we can earn from this. All right. So too dependent on the platform may be an issue. At the same time, we may lose a direct relationship with the potential readers or the customer, because we can see that the Apple owns most of the customer data. We don't even know the passwords. To a certain extent, that's good news to us, because from the ethical perspective, that what if the data leaked? Well, we'll need to be managing those very carefully. However, these are managed by the Apple company, so to a certain extent, we are transferring that risk. But the downside of that will certainly be we don't know who are they specifically. There might be a content and compliance risk we may be thinking of, because Apple may be changing its policy at all times. So what if they change their policy, the certain content can't be displayed If you're too relying on that particular platform, that will be an issue. But this is not something that I am mostly worrying about. What I'm worrying about is the negotiation. Because there might be certain platforms on the exam day, because the market is really consolidating. And that's why we are one of these top 5 players. So that's why whether or not we should work with the platform like that. Well, think of the New York Times. They are reluctant to share customer data with Apple, for example. So these are something that we will need to be negotiating with the platform on the exam day. Of course, this suits larger player, but not suitable to smaller player. Negotiation would be the key there. But of course, the downside of the New York Times is that audience growth would be relatively slow there, because it only allows the platform to display certain content rather than allowing it to control the user data. So that would be an issue that could cause into the ethical issue on the exam day that we need to consider. Now, another thing I'd like to talk to you about is that the company was established 60 years ago. This means the change management could be an issue, especially for the paywall. Now, have you heard of paywall before? It's like a wall that we need to walk through that. In other words, if the reader wants to have the high quality content, of course, they must pay. And that's what I mean by paywall. Now, a very good example is from a magazine company. It's called Condé Nast. Now, at that time, Condé Nast introducing paywall has certain problems. I like to integrate this with the SBL very hot topic called change management. Now, in a magazine company, you must know that the stakeholder, for example, the editor, will be so powerful, because the editor will determine, using their judgment, of what articles to publish or what contents to publish. Now, they may not be caring about the conversion rates and sales revenue and profit and so on, because this is what commercial team will be caring about. And also IT and product teams would be caring about whether or not you can timely publishing your data onto a website or apps. Now, if the company introduced a paywall, that would be an issue. Because if you're introducing a paywall, we'll need to think of the profitability. So this is why the editor will not be solely in charge of what contents to publish. So what company did at that time is to connect all the processes all together. Now, how it used the change management concept from, for example, the Balogun Hopefully, is that firstly, from the authority's perspective, the editor could no longer decide alone whether the content was free or paid. The editors must work with other members from various departments. This is what matrix structure will come into being. You need to know the advantage of it. So, for example, be more responsive, okay, to the particular decision that we are going to be making. So at the same time, each and every day, that the planning content is not just to be write, edit, and publish cycle. For example, teams will need to decide whether or not the content will be profitable by considering various issues. Now, the process may be slow. Of course, it may introduce cultural resistance, but this is unavoidable. All right, so we must accept that. Of course, you can include that into your logical points in the exam. We also need to change the rewards and control systems. So, for example, by introducing the paywall, we still make sure that the quality of each title of the magazine will be high, but we will need to focus on different KPIs in there. So, for example, whether or not the published content will help subscription growth, will help with the retention, will reduce the churn rate, which means the number of subscribers will leave the business. Alright, so that will show exactly whether or not the magazine will be doing a good job. Now, not only for that, for doing three-step model, although it came up last time, the business roll out paywalls gradually, not all in once, from magazine to magazine basis. Not only for that, the reader reactions were monitored closely, which means the refreeze stage will not be going back to the original place, for example. Alright, so that's it. All about change management there. So we need to focus on. You also need to think of if it is focusing on the laser subject. Now, laser subject will have certain implications. Firstly, it may be affected by uncertain economy because it's all about discretionary spending. So you can't rely on single revenue stream. Now, if I'm the CEO of this company, I will be focusing on membership rather than just subscription. Because subscription simply means I give you content. So you must be aware that the internet economy is more of a community-based economic model rather than simply be, I've got a product and I sell it to you. Now, because it has many magazines, titles, it can license these contents to third parties to use in their various events. We can also provide very high quality courses because we all know that the leisure topics may be easily replaced or substituted by other substitutes. So we can create our exclusive content to make sure our competitive advantage is built. We can also partnership with other brands to attract more revenue income in there. So these are our potential strategic choices that we can think of. Finally, in both print-based and digital format, what do you think? There's a clear risk here because the print-based, firstly, what if paper shortage happens? It will increase our costs of printing. So nowadays, we make these in-house from the Preseen. So raw material costs will be an issue. Of course, the other downside of that could be, what if we print this out, but we lack paper? If you lack paper, you delay the production, you delay the publication, and it will ruin your reputation in the end. Also, it will create cash flow pressure onto your business, all right, if the costs are rising. Now, as I said before, potential discontinued decision related to printing activity, make sure that you know the number crunching exercises related to that. So just to give you a flavor of a discontinued decision. If I were to shut this down, let's say that I can save fixed costs, for example, salaries, by $100. But I will lose contribution, which means sales revenue from the magazine minus the variable cost of that, of 80. I lose 80, but I save 100 if we shut this down. So therefore, I would like to shut this down because I can save more. Now, hopefully, I've given you a lot of background information, firstly, to this company. And from the next video onwards, I will be analysing the section 2 onwards by giving you more analyses. And I look forward to your exam success soon. Bye-bye.
ACCA, accounting for your future.